Prepare for a rude awakening.
Shalom, Torah fans. This is Michael Rood on the Golan Heights in Israel, above the beautiful Sea of Galilee. In today's episode, Nehemia will conclude his teaching with a short analysis of the use of Hebrew and Aramaic in first century Judea. During their years of working as translators on the Dead Sea Scrolls at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Nehemia and other Hebrew and Aramaic linguists made an amazing discovery that seems to have completely eluded Mr. Mel Gibson of recent Passion fame. I will then take you to a mountaintop near the shore of the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, to hear some of the most profound words ever spoken on earth. During the next two episodes, we will allow Yeshua's words to speak for themselves out of the ancient Hebrew text of Matthew's Gospel. By the time we finish our series, we will understand the king and the rules of the kingdom over which he reigns with an unimagined clarity. These final two episodes will change your life for eternity. Now, episode 9 in the 10-part series, Raiders of the Lost Book, Discoveries in the Ancient Hebrew Text of Matthew's Gospel.
The last thing I want to talk about is the question of Hebrew versus Aramaic. This is something that's gotten a lot of attention recently, the Aramaic question. How many people here have seen the movie The Passion of the Christ? Okay, a good number of people. In the movie The Passion of the Christ, what language did Jesus of Nazareth speak? He spoke Aramaic. Okay, so, well, I think we should stop the discussion here because it wouldn't be right for me to argue with such a great Hebrew scholar as Mel Gibson. But seriously, Mel Gibson went and he talked to, I'm sure, experts who told him that in the first century Yeshua spoke Aramaic. And why is it that he thought that, or why is it that his experts thought that? And here's one verse that has a lot of people very much confused. Acts 26:13-14. This is a famous vision that Shaul has, that Paul has on the road from Damascus. And there Paul describes his vision. He says, "About noon as I was on the road, I saw a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, 'Shaul, Shaul, why do you persecute me?'" And Shaul describes that he says that he asked who's speaking, and he explains that the answer was that Yeshua is speaking. So according to and by the way, this is the NIV translation, which I'm sure you all know it stands for the nearly inspired version. Now, according to the NIV translation, what language did Yeshua speak to Shaul in? According to the NIV, Yeshua spoke to Shaul in Aramaic. Well, let's get to the bottom of this, because if you look at other translations, you probably already know that they don't have the word Aramaic. They have a different word. So why is it that the NIV translates, "I heard a voice saying to me" in Aramaic? I mentioned earlier that based on internal linguistic evidence, it appears that Acts was originally written in Hebrew. However, we have not yet uncovered the Hebrew original of Acts. All we have is the Greek translation of Acts. So let's look at the Greek translation and see in the Greek translation what is the word that is translated into English by the NIV as Aramaic. The word in Greek that's translated as Aramaic is the Greek word Hebraidi. Hebraidi. Do we have any Greek scholars in the audience that can tell me the meaning of this? Any 3-year-olds that can tell me the meaning of this word Hebraidi? Hebraidi is Hebrew. That's obvious. You don't need to be a Greek scholar to know that Hebraidi is Hebrew. So Shaul didn't hear Yeshua speaking to him in Aramaic. He heard Yeshua speaking to him in Hebrew. So what language did Yeshua speak? Hebrew. Okay. So what we can see here is that there's been an intentional modification and change by some of the translation to cover up the fact that Yeshua spoke Hebrew. Now, here's another verse that has a lot of people confused. Psalm 22. And there we read the statement, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And where is that familiar from? Of course, everyone knows that's Yeshua's dying words. Yeshua's dying words, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And let's look at how these appear in the Greek. In Matthew 27, verse 46, we read, "Yeshua cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" That is to say, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, from the words "that is to say," you already know that the Greek is translating something from a foreign language. And in fact, the words Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani Those 4 words are not Greek words. Those are foreign words that are quoted in the Greek, and in fact, those words are Aramaic. So if we looked at this verse, it sounds like, if we looked at it in the Greek, it sounds like Yeshua must have spoken Aramaic. His dying words were in Aramaic. Let's look at the Hebrew, though. We've already seen the Greek doesn't always match the Hebrew. In Hebrew, Matthew 27:46, it says, Yeshua cried with loud voice, saying in the holy language, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani. Now, Eli, Eli, lama azavtani, that's Hebrew. So in Hebrew, Matthew, his words are quoted in Hebrew, and not only are they quoted in Hebrew, but his words are specifically identified as being spoken in the holy language. Now, throughout history, Hebrew has been known primarily by 2 names, Ivrit, which is just the Hebrew word for Hebrew, and the holy tongue, Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language of the holy tongue. So, according to Hebrew Matthew, Yeshua spoke his final words in Hebrew, and not only that, but it's specifically identified as the language he's speaking in Hebrew, just like in Acts, it says Yeshua cried out speaking in Hebrew. Well, what's going on here? And really, we can't go into the final, we can't get to the bottom of this topic today. We're just going to present the tip of the iceberg. And really, when we look at this and we follow this to its logical conclusion, we get an entire new understanding of that final scene as Yeshua's dying, of what happened there. But we'll look at just the preliminary information. So, my God, why have you forsaken me? These words are quoted in the Greek text in Aramaic. The Greek text quotes these words in Aramaic. That's a fact. The second fact we have is that the Hebrew text quotes these words in Hebrew and specifically states that these words were spoken in Hebrew. So how could both these statements be true? Or can they both be true? Well, actually, they can both be true. Because if I look just at the Greek, I would determine that the Greek was translated from Aramaic. If I look at the Hebrew, I would determine that the Hebrew was spoken in Hebrew and written in Hebrew. How could both those be true? The only way they could both be true is if there's a missing Aramaic phase. And what happened, apparently, is the Hebrew was translated into Aramaic, and then from Aramaic it was translated into Greek. And actually, there's a lot of evidence to support this, that the Greek was translated from an Aramaic original, but it would seem from this evidence and lots of other evidence that I can't go into now, that the Aramaic was a translation from the Hebrew. Now, this is very significant, because what this means is that the Greek is not a second-hand translation from Hebrew, it's a third-hand translation from Hebrew. And remember that Papias told us that Matthew wrote his gospel in Hebrew and many did their best to translate them. Well, apparently the Greek translator took one look at the Hebrew and said, no way, I'm going to go right to the Aramaic translation. And what we have is a translation of the translation in the Greek. Well, I talk more about a lot of these topics in my book, The Hebrew Yeshua versus the Greek Jesus. And I want to say some final closing words. I mentioned at the beginning that I don't look to Yeshua as the Messiah, and that really hasn't changed. I believe strictly in the Tanakh, the Old Testament. However, my understanding of who Yeshua was has changed. I started off doing this study believing, as most Jews do, that Yeshua came to usurp the Torah, to lead people astray, to change the Torah and modify the Torah, and lead people away from the Torah. And now I found that in the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, the Hebrew Yeshua was actually leading people back to Torah, upholding the Torah, saying if their claim to authority is that they sit in the seat of Moses, then do as Moses said. That he's not come to change one jot or one tittle, but he's simply upholding the Torah. Thank you.
Thank you, Nehemia. So in closing this evening, we're going to take it right back to Matthew chapter 5. This is the first recorded words of Yeshua, and he is speaking there as a multitude is gathered together around him, around the Sea of Galilee. And it says that seeing the multitude, he went up into a mountain, and when he was set, his disciples came to him. The rest of the fair-weather Jesus people, with their WWJD t-shirts, ball caps, and name bands, stayed down on the sunny beach waiting for him to come back to feed them a few more loaves and fishes. But his disciples, those that were really disciplined, those who really hungered and thirsted after righteousness, they climbed the mountain in his footsteps and listened to him as he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Now, the King from heaven, who is of the royal lineage of King David, through his only earthly parent, Miriam, the seed of the woman, now we are going to see the King from heaven as he lays down the rules of the kingdom of heaven. Later on, we're going to see that he's going to say that the gate to the kingdom is very narrow, very, very few are going to find it. But the path that leads to destruction is extremely broad, and most of the people are going to enter into the broad gate that leads to destruction. Now the King from heaven is laying down the rules of the kingdom, and we must listen very carefully to what he has to say. But because he's already told us, and we're going to see, that most people will never find the path that he's leading us to. Then the next verse, blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. In the Greek, the word filled is filled to the point of one's hunger. And I believe that if we were here until 5 o'clock in the morning, there would still be those who would be here because your desire is insatiable. You have a hunger and a thirst after righteousness that just doesn't stop. Where many people have a 10-minute hunger for the truth, you have a hunger that's going to take all of eternity to be filled. And now the very verse which has become really the battle cry of the entire Western Gentile Christian church. This is the theme verse of American Christianity. It is Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, think not. Think not. Check our brains at the door. We can't count to 3. We can't count to 14. It's just too hard. No, that's not what it says. We are not going to allow us to isolate a little numbered soundbite out of this scripture. We're going to read the whole thing in context to understand what he's saying. Do not think for 1 second anything that you are about to hear from me, anything that anybody tells you that I'm going to say, anything that anyone comes up with for this next period while I'm ministering, even for the next 2,000 years. I want to get it completely straight right here at the very beginning. With all these people left out on the beach, and you guys are up here to hear this, this is the first time my words are being recorded. Matthew, make sure you write this down and get it straight. I don't want there to be any confusion on this issue forever. Do not think that I have come to destroy the law, the Torah, or the prophets. I have not come to destroy, but to fulfill. Now we are hearing the words of a prophet who actually fits the description of what Moses said. That there is going to come a prophet that we must listen to. This anointed king of Israel. This lineage of King David. This prophet who we must hear, who is not going to turn us away from the Torah, but he is going to lead us into a correct understanding of the Torah. Now we have a candidate for the Messiah, don't we? Someone who is not perverting Torah, who's not leading us away, who's not doing signs, miracles, and wonders and doing away with the Torah, because that's the true sign of a false prophet. He said, I have not come to destroy the law or the prophets. The word law is the word in the Greek, nomia. We're going to stay with the Greek on this for a minute. Because in the Septuagint, every time we have the word Torah, they translated it as nomia. That is Torah. He did not come to destroy the nomia, the Torah. Now, nomia and Torah, neither one of them means the law. It's the law! Oh, I saw some of you jump. You saw flashing blue lights, prison bars, handcuffs. You had the right to remain silent. It was all too familiar with some of you. But that's not what the word Torah means. Torah means the instructions. Nomia means the instructions, like astronomy. Astro, star, nomia, instruction. It's star instruction. It's not the law. It's the Creator's revelation of what this whole conscious physical experience is all about. It's very simple. It's his instructions on how to live life. In 1 John, John said, how do we know that we love God? Because we keep his commandments. His commandments are not burdensome. What are burdensome? The rules, regulations, doctrines, and commandments of men. That's what's burdensome. Then he said, how do we know that we love the children of God? Because we keep his commandments. The very same thing that Yeshua said. He said, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Upon these two commandments hang all of the Torah and the prophets. Now, we go right back to the Ten Commandments, and we see that the first four commandments is detailed exactly how we are to love God, how he wants to be worshiped, how he wants to be served. The last six commandments are how we love our neighbor. And all of the Torah is laid out in that very same fashion. How about the commandment that tells us, what if this brother's ox gores my cow to death? We're neighbors. We both had something very negative happen. It's going to cost both of us financially. And so the Torah tells us what to do, how to handle this situation if something didn't go right in life. Has anyone in the room ever had anything go wrong in life? Okay, the rest of you, you just haven't lived long enough. Okay, so the Torah tells us how to work out our relationship, how to love each other in this situation. Because if we simply do what the Word of God commands us, we are given the commandment of how to handle it, we both do it, and then we can patch our relationship up, we can love each other as neighbors, and we can get along, and everything is going to end up okay. Even though we've had something negative that's happened in our lives that is a monetary problem. So the Torah tells us all about this. Now, even according to rabbinic calculations, there are only 613 commandments in the Torah. And most of them don't even apply to you. Some are written just for children. Some are written just for women. Some are written just for men. Some are written just for Levites among the men. Others are written only for Kohanim among the Levites among men. And some only for the Kohen when he's operating in the temple among the Levites among men. And if anyone's cared to notice, there isn't even a temple today. Only 613 commandments total. In America, you have over 2.4 million commandments, laws that apply directly to you. You tell me who's under the law. Let's get a right perspective on this. His commandments are not grievous. His words are life. They are sweeter than honeycomb to the taste. But yet, we in this world have been taught to have enmity against God's Torah, enmity against his commandments. He said, do not add to, do not take away from. And we see that the Pharisees add 2, add 2, add 2, add 4, add 6, add 8, add thousands of commandments. But what has the Christian world done? They've taken away to where we are living in absolute lawlessness in America today. Sin and sexual perversion in the church and among clergy is absolutely epidemic because we've done away with the Torah. Yeshua said, do not think for one moment that I have come to destroy the law, the Torah. I didn't come to destroy, but to fulfill the law or the prophets. See, many people in America have an idea that the prophets are fortune tellers, that they tell the future. No, that is not the job of the prophet. Neither the one that Moses spoke of or the ones that operated throughout history. The prophet's job is to instruct people in the Torah, which is the fence around God's people, and the prophets say, get back inside the fence. You people are all outside of God's will. Everybody get back inside. Now, if you don't do it, I am going to foretell your future, and it's not going to be a pretty picture. But they were not prophets who did nothing but give soothing sayings about people's future fortunes. That's what prophets have become in the American Christian church. Just line up after we receive an offering to release the anointing, and you will get prophesied over, and you'll hear it. It'll be nothing but soothing sayings about your future fortunes. No one is telling God's people to get back inside the instructions, be obedient to the Torah. It has become absolutely lawless. Yeshua did not come to destroy the Torah or the prophets, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth passes, one jot, one tittle shall in no wise pass from the Torah till all be fulfilled. So I ask the question, has heaven and earth passed? Even to the casual observer, it's like no one could make a mistake on this. Have all of the Torah and the prophets been fulfilled? One half of the Torah, one half of the prophets, one half of the feast of the Lord, the spring feast of the Lord, speak of the Messiah as the suffering servant, the atoning sin sacrifice. The other half of the Torah, the other half of the prophets, the other half of the feast of the Lord, the fall feast of the Lord, speak of the Messiah as the conquering, reigning king, subduing the world, ruling with righteousness. So again, I ask you, have all the Torah and the prophets been fulfilled? No, absolutely not. Oh, excuse me. You do err not knowing the scriptures. What scriptures is Yahshua speaking of? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Acts, Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians. They didn't even exist. It was the Torah, the foundation. That is what he was speaking of. If we do not understand God's basic foundation of what this life is all about, and even what we were to expect of the Messiah, then we can completely twist the scriptures and end up destroying our lives. He went on to say, whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments. Now let's stay with the context. What commandments are we talking about? The commandments in the Torah. That's what the context is. Whosoever shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Reverend least, pastor least. Whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So one might say, hey, okay, so maybe I won't be called great in the kingdom. I really don't want any persecution. I don't want to lose any of my congregation. I don't want to lose any friends. I'll just be least. Well, I ask you, what is the least? Least is a relative term, is it not? So I would ask you to consider, what is the least of the following bovine products here on the screen? T-bone steak, rump roast, hamburger, or a cow pie? I'm just trying to make this, bear some realism to you. I have had far more experience shoveling number 4 on the farm than I have shoveling number 1 at the steakhouse. But when you hear what Yeshua says, you realize that number 4 would be kind compared to what he has to say. Least in the kingdom. Now, he says, whosoever shall do the commandments and teach the commandments, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. He won't be called great on earth, I will guarantee you. But in heaven, he will be called great. For I say unto you, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no wise enter the kingdom of heaven. Now notice that he doesn't use, for an example, drug dealers or sex perverts or skid row bums. He's talking scribes and Pharisees. Scribes, the men who discipline their lives to sit down for an entire year and write that Torah scroll out on the hides of 55 sheep. Meticulous. He's not talking wet behind the ears seminary graduates. He's talking about disciplined men who put their life into maintaining the scriptures. And he uses Pharisees on that as well. My goodness, talk about rules and regulations, talking about little flaming hoops that you have to jump through to describe every act that you do in life. Certainly, anyone that disciplines themselves to that degree, to what shoe they put on, how they wash their hands, what prayers they say, certainly. But he said, unless your righteousness exceed theirs. Well, let's say it in our language today. For I say unto you, unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the most religious members of your ministerial associations, theological cemeteries, and schools of prophetic anointing, you can kiss your ticket to heaven goodbye. That's sort of the MIV, the Marine Infantry version of that particular verse there, but I think it helps to drive the point home. In the final episode of our series, we will hear Yeshua's closing statement, which binds his entire teaching together. While most people never read much further than, "Blessed art thou," Yeshua was quick to attack and expose the religious perversions that were part of the Pharisaic system then and are still part of the churchianity system today. Yeshua reluctantly revealed that very few people who say they follow him will ever find the gate that leads to life. And of those who do find the gate, fewer still will travel the narrow path to the end. Next week, we'll let Yeshua show us the gate. Join us again next time for the last episode in the 10-part series, Raiders of the Lost Book, Discoveries in the Ancient Hebrew Text of Matthew's Gospel. This is Michael Rood in the Galilee bidding you shalom, peace, and I will see you when the smoke clears.